A seller carried contract is something I see more often with vacant land purchases, but it can be used for residential and commercial properties as well. In a seller carry, the seller acts as the lender for a given amount of time. The seller accepts your mortgage payments and applies them to a balance that is owed on the home. Every seller contract is unique to the individual seller. Here's why that's important. Every seller has different contract terms that they will accept. Some will work with a down payment of 20%, others want 75% down. Some will charge 9% interest, others will charge 12% interest. Some will carry for 1 year, others for as long as 10 years. There's tremendous variation. So if you come to me and say, I would like to purchase some land with a seller carry, my next step is going to learn about what you need in a seller carry contract and then find sellers who offer similar terms. It is definitely a more complex process. I usually do several of these in a year, and here's what I normally see. Down payment amount can vary quite a bit depending on what the seller needs the funds for. If the seller doesn't urgently need any cash for a project, the down payment could be as low as 15%, which basically covers closing costs and any of the taxes that are owed on the property. It just kind of clears everything out. If the seller is selling the property so that they have money for their next investment project, the down payment will be higher. 50% down is not unusual, and it can go as high as 75% down. Sellers usually agree to carry the contract for 2 to 7 years, with 2 or 3 years being the most common that I see in this area. During that time, you would make the mortgage payments to the seller, then refinance the balance into a more traditional land loan or mortgage before the term is up. Sellers normally charge an interest rate that is 3 to 5% higher than the going mortgage rate that a big lender would provide. Seller lenders are a much smaller operation, and it's generally not feasible for them to operate for the same price as the big companies. It takes more interest to make it worth their time and their work. Most sellers in a seller carry contract will check your credit score and will require you to have at least the same minimum scores as a commercial lender. And by that I mean like big box lender. So a credit score of 580 to 650, although some sellers will want closer to 700, just depends on the seller. Pros and cons. So here's what seller carry has going for it. The first thing is that the deed is recorded in the buyer's name at closing. So as long as you make the payments, the seller cannot interfere. Second, the buyer also normally has control over the property. So unless it is specified in your contract, you have the freedom to paint the walls, renovate, and landscape. Finally, some sellers may work with buyers who don't qualify for a traditional mortgage. Now this can be misleading. Most sellers won't work with folks who have bankruptcies, foreclosures, or poor credit. However, sellers may work with buyers who get paid under the table, or buyers who are purchasing vacant land intending to build within the year. Now, here's the downside. Balloon payments. Most sellers will only carry for 2 to 5 years. So unless you are making massive payments, you will still owe a balance when the seller carry contract is up. That balance becomes a balloon payment, and it needs to be paid all at once. For most buyers, that means you must plan to refinance the loan with a normal lender before the contract ends. The regular lender pays off the balance, and you resume making payments with the new mortgage company. Next, there is some potential for fraud. There is a con going around where the seller offers their home for sale on a seller contract. The buyers bring a large down payment, and they all agree to save money by leaving the title and escrow companies out of the loop. Then a few months later, it comes out that the seller never really owned the house to begin with. She was a tenant running a scam. The real property owners show up to find out why rent hasn't been paid, and they find a nice family living in the home completely unaware that they've been scammed. There is a safe way to complete seller carry, but buyers have to make sure that they do their homework and protect themselves. Finally, let's take a look at how seller carried contracts stack up against other loan types, traditional mortgages, and rent to own. Like a traditional mortgage, the deed goes into the buyer's name early on, and the contracts are designed to protect buyers. Rent-to-own contracts are designed to significantly benefit the sellers. In terms of risk level, seller carry is about the middle of the road when it's correctly set up. Rent-to-own is the one that has the highest risk for buyers. For terms and term length, the traditional mortgage is easily superior. Seller carry and rent-to-own have shorter terms, higher interest, and more restrictions. And ultimately, you're going to have to go with a mortgage or regular loan type anyway, down the road. However, sometimes there are circumstances that make one of these options a useful alternative. If you have questions about what loan type would work for you, please call, text, or shoot an email. I look forward to answering your questions.